Well, join me in prayer, and then we'll jump into our study for tonight. Father, we are so grateful that you are the God who sees and knows. You are above all things. There is nothing that escapes your notice. You are never surprised or caught off guard. Lord, you are always working. And in every circumstance, you're continuing to prove the truth that was revealed to us through the Apostle Paul, that all things are working together for the good of those who are called according to your purposes. And so, Lord, we want to be a part of the good you want to do, even in the midst of the hard circumstances of this hurricane. Well, we realize that not only are there physical hurricanes, mudslides, and devastation in our country, but there are spiritual hurricanes and mudslides and devastation. We're spinning out of control, and into the darkness and into the lostness. You called the church to be bright lights shining. You called us to be salt, bringing flavor and bringing holiness and addressing rottenness and brokenness and sin. And so do that work in our own lives. We all too often, God, allow darkness, ignorance, foolishness, sinfulness creep into our own lives so that we are unsalty salt. Lord, and then as you transform us and sanctify us, Lord, you do so with the purpose of bringing this goodness to lay before men and women that they might find in you a reason for giving glory. And so, Lord, open up truth tonight as we look at these things together, not merely so that we might know it, but that we might be equipped to articulate your great love into all the situations where that love is needed. Ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right. Well, last week we made a foray into the issue of transgender ideology, and I bit off more than I could chew, so I was not able to get through all of it. So we're just going to take up this look as we think about culture. Remember, our focus on Wednesday nights during the fall is understanding the culture. And knowing that the culture tells us some things about itself and reveals some things about the deep beliefs of the people in that culture. And we're to be men and women of Issachar. We're to be men and women who understand the times and know what to do. And our culture, we realize, as all cultures do, but our cultural moment is throwing us a lot of curveballs, a lot of things that leave us scratching our heads and wondering what in the world? How did we get here? And often these things can put us back on our heels. But we're called not to sit back on our heels or withdraw because something seems offensive to us, or we can just assume that there's nothing for us to add or contribute. And instead, we're called as people who've been redeemed to be energized by the opportunity to walk towards broken things with redemption, no matter what they are, even when it has to do with transgender ideology. And so we've been learning, I want to remind you each week that culture, a good definition of culture is what society does with the world in order to flourish. And so when you see people engaging in social behavior, they're doing so because they think it's going to make the world better. They think it's going to make their lives better. And so when we watch what they wear and what they do and technology they use and things they repeat and activities they engage in and what they view as entertaining, they may not be able to give you a rational explanation for why they're doing these things. But they're doing those things because they think it's going to help them flourish. They think it's going to solve a problem or meet a need. And so if we'll watch what they do and watch what's happening in our culture, then we can come to understand it. And then in understanding it, like men and women of Issachar, then we can know what to do. The men of Issachar understood the times and knew what Israel should do. A culture is made of ideas, champions, artifacts, and institutions. So if you look around, listen for the ideas, listen for the things that are said. Those are going to, the culture's job is to locate and articulate ideas. Champions, look at the people who are celebrated. artifacts, that's technology, that's the things we use, the things we wear, the things we use to get things done. That reveals what we believe. And then our institutions. It's the institutions, jobs, education, and a church, and economic institutions. They're the ones who collect and hold on to all of this cultural information, all this cultural knowledge, because they want to help a people flourish over time. And so we're having a question, because it's always the question of culture: how do we flourish? How do we do well? And what it's occurred to me is that we have a great clash of cultures and a great clash of cultural ideas that are fundamentally a great clash over the question, what does it mean to flourish? How do we really do well when people are unhappy, not doing well, failing in their relationships, unable to find meaning in life, unable to endure when things become difficult? Then we recognize that there's a problem in the culture that creates an inability to flourish. And so for hundreds of years in the West, Western culture was coming together, and I want to remind you each week, here's what Western culture is and what Western culture ascribes to, and you see that on number B under our review, is that the world's habitable order. And so the world is the place for human beings to live. That's how we understand what the world is. It's a place where we can live, and that the world's habitable order is intelligible, universal, and improvable. I've been going over this, so I'll try to hurry past it, but what the Western culture said is that we can look around at our world, and intelligible means you can understand it, that there's an internal order to it, that if we'll study it and think about it with God's help, we can come to understand the world, that what's true in one country is true in all countries. And so we can find the truth. That truth is universal, and that it's improvable. We've been put in this world to live and to make things better. We have this impulse that when we see things that aren't right, when something's not flourishing, that we've been gifted in a unique way to do something about it. How? As image bearers. The great Western idea is that every single person is made in the image of God. Every single person has value. Every single person is a unique combination of things, as unique as their thumbprint, and they're uniquely positioned to make a unique contribution to a need that has arisen. And that's what people are like. That's what people are for. And for our discussion about transgender ideology, this image bearing is gendered. We've known a lot longer than just Western civilization has existed. People have known from the very beginning that there are males and females, and that our image bearing is gendered. What we know from Scripture, from Genesis chapter 1, is that when God created us in His image, He created us male and female in His image. So there's something about our gender that is essential to our identity and who we are. Again, I'm giving you all kinds of crazy news. Men and women are different. I don't know if you know that. And you guys ever met a gal you'll know she's different from me, and those differences are profound. They go down to the very bottom, and they're a part of God's creative purposes. It's not a mistake that there are two genders. It's a key to our existence and to our flourishing, that we are gendered. This Western worldview that has informed the Western world for several centuries, and please hear this, is the engine that has driven advance, material prosperity, freedom from famine, and a time of stability, an expansion of knowledge that human civilization has never known. That's what the Western culture encases. That is now being questioned by the Marxist worldview. And so I say this every week. I know that when I say the discussion partner in our culture right now is Marxism, that makes me sound like a nut. All right? That makes me sound kooky. But I'm convinced of it. And so, kooky or not, I believe that rather than it being secularism or atheism, that's not really where the battle line is drawn. It's really between Western culture and a Marxist culture. All right? Let me tell you what that is. In opposition to the Western worldview, the Marxist says that the world order, what you see around you, everything you see around you, the world order was created by the oppressors. And this world order must be destroyed in order for a new world to emerge. And when I say everything, I mean the Marxist worldview says everything. These tables and chairs are a part of a capitalist plot to hold oppressed people down. And we're looking for a world, so the first thing to do is get rid of tables and chairs. Just throw them out. And then there'll be a new way to be together. We don't know what that's going to be, but everything is designed to keep the oppressors in charge who can hold the oppressed down. And since the whole culture is designed to do that, the only way to stop oppression from happening is to completely destroy the existing world order. Okay? That manifests itself then in what I call sexual Marxism. This idea that in order for people to be truly free, in order for a bourgeois society to be eliminated, then the entire Western sexual ethic, including categories like man, woman, family, mother, father, parent, child, all of those, male, female, all of those categories, they're just created by the oppressor culture. And the only way to be freed from it is to destroy all of those concepts. Particularly for sexual Marxism, the target is the idea of normalcy itself. We want to get rid of the idea of being normal. We want to get rid of not just we want to get rid of normal people and only have abnormal people. What they mean is even the idea of thinking in terms of a binary between normal and abnormal, that has to be gone. And so when all of those categories are yanked up and yanked out, then a new world order will emerge, a post-gender world, a post-family world, a post-mom-dad world, a post-nuclear family world. And that world will be utopia. That world will be so much better than the world that exists now. And that is really what the worldview is up to. Okay? So, yeah, we'd be similar to what Satan would think, right? And so, right, it is, and I've mentioned this a couple of other times. Marx's hero was Mephistopheles, the figure of Satan in Goethe's Faust. And Mephistopheles' big statement in that play is, everything that exists deserves to perish. Everything that exists deserves to perish. The world God made is a dumb world. It's unfair. It doesn't work right. And the right thing to do is to destroy it. Y'all have heard me do this rendition a couple times. This is my theory about Satan, is the thing that makes Satan truly satanic is he thinks he's the good God. He thinks God is Satan. The truly evil person is the person who doesn't know he's evil. And that Mephistophelian spirit that says the world was made the wrong way and it needs to be destroyed, Marx loved that idea. And so that's why when you see the word revolution, that's always a tip of the hand, that the goal here is to wreck everything. That's one of the things that makes it very difficult for people who have a Western worldview is we think, well, don't you want it to flourish? Don't you want people to do well? Or don't you want all people to do well, since all people are made in the image of God? Marxists would say, well, we don't want all people to do well. We want oppressors to be destroyed. And we want anything that stands in the way of revolution to be destroyed. So that ultimately all the good people are the ones who will be left, and they'll be doing all the things that are good. But in the process of tearing everything to smithereens, that's just part of it. That's just part of what has to happen. And it's hard for people with a Western worldview to believe they're being serious. But that's how you get, remember, somewhat violent but mostly peaceful protesting? Remember that? Chiron? That idea that some destruction is just, hey, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. Okay? So how did we get to transgender ideology? And transgender ideology says you can change your gender. That since gender is a social construct, a male can decide he is female, and in that making that decision, and then perhaps taking some medicine and having some surgery, he actually can become female, which is an idea that abandons rationality, it abandons reality, and yet it can be stated unironically in our culture, and now it's sort of your job to go, well, okay. How did we get there? Where up is down, black is white, right is left. How do we get there? Let me give you a few pointers to some things to think about. And I've got in there in parentheses from the first sexual revolution. I ran across this idea that I thought was pretty nifty. The very first sexual revolution is the Christian sexual revolution in the first century. The Greco-Roman worldview about sexuality was anything goes. And so it's good for free Roman males to do whatever they want to do. And so that's how society should structure itself. Society should function sexually to ensure that free Roman males can do anything they want sexually. And when the free Roman male is allowed to do that, then society can flourish. Well, good for the free Roman males, but for everybody else, pretty unpleasant. And it wasn't good for the Roman males either. And so, but that was the view of things, and society looked like it. You would have been blown away had you gone in the first century into an ordinary Roman town. The things that were going on, wow, were shocking. And then enters the Judeo-Christian sexual ethic. And by the way, it was a crucial feature of the gospel that attracted and caused people to come to Christ, is these people were living in this completely different way. And even though it was an utter rejection of the culture, these people were flourishing. They were happy. They had marriages and families that did well, and the children did well, and they threw the doors of their homes open, and they welcomed orphans into their homes. They were the ones who went down to the dumps where the babies had been thrown away, the products of the out of control Roman culture, and they would raise these children as their own, and the children would flourish and go out to change the world. And slowly, a sexual revolution occurred and really did redefine man, woman, husband, wife, parent, child, father, child, mother, child. There's a great book, I've referred to it several times, O.M. Backey, When Children Became Persons. And the Greco-Romans really didn't think that a child was a person until they were about 8. And so before 8, if dad decided, you know what, I just don't like that kid, that's it. That's it. Christians taught the Western world that children were people. And see, we think that's just all the product of rational investigation. Of course children are people, except when they're in the womb. Then suddenly they're not people, but that's a different topic for a different day. But do you realize that things that seem rational to us are really only because they're the foundations of our culture, and they're rooted in supernatural truth. Anyway, but then there was another sexual revolution centuries later, the one you're familiar with. It really started in the late 1800s in Edwardian England. Victorian sexual values were being thrown away, and with Sigmund Freud, and then with a movement that began to view sexual repression as the problem, the rules began to change, and the Christian sexual revolution was going to be flipped over once again. And it would lead ultimately to transgender ideology. So some of the things that fueled that, number one, is the Marxist idea that revolution is a good way to solve problems. That's why it's called the sexual revolution. The sexual revolution, as it really manifested itself in the 1960s, and the anything goes except monogamous, lifelong commitment that produce and raise children. Now, you don't want to do that, but do whatever else you want. And what the revolutionary part of it is, and only good things will happen. We're going to abandon the old values, and we're going to have this new way, and it's all just going to go, it's going to be great. It's going to be great. But was the sexual revolution great for people? It's great for 10 or 15 minutes, or maybe 2 or 3 years, but it becomes very not great after that. But revolution doesn't care. Revolution doesn't care. It's what I want right now. That's it. Okay, so, and that revolutionary idea is it's a Marxist idea, but it's deeper than that. I am slowly making my way through a book called The Conservative Mind. It's the hardest book I've ever read, and I've read a lot of hard books. And so I read about 90 pages, and then I have to start over and read the same 90 pages over again. Political conservatism arose after the French Revolution. I did not know this, so that's why I'm trying to learn, because I really didn't know the history of conservatism. And I'm trying to noodle out the relationship between theological conservatism and political conservatism, because we don't have a good understanding of that, and you can get whacked out in a lot of directions. But the truth is, we're theologically conservative in our church. It tends to produce a lot of social conservatism and even political conservatism, but we've got to get square on how all of that integrates together. So question one for me was, well, what's a conservative? What does that mean? Edmund Burke, in the days after the French Revolution, said basically this: how do we keep the French Revolution from happening again? Because it went bad. And see, we don't really even hardly know any of the history of the French Revolution. It was bad. Reign of terror, guillotine, kangaroo courts, the loss of law and order, the loss of basic human rights. And what Burke was trying to figure out was why the American Revolution went so well and the French Revolution went so poorly. And I'm still reading the book, so I'm not going to give you all the answers. But the main idea that Burke says is this idea that you destroy things in order for the next thing to come. That's where the left gets it wrong. And that's where revolution goes wrong, is when you start tearing things up that you don't understand. Lots of babies get thrown out with the bathwater. And there are deep things that go down to the theological level that when you yank them up and chunk them out, you throw a lot of other things that you wish you had saved out with them. So one was the idea, we'll just have a revolution. We'll just throw all this stuff away because some of the outcomes were bad, and only good things will happen as a result of it. The second thing that fuels the sexual revolution that led to transgender ideology is everything can be reduced to physics. So this is the heart and the logical conclusion of the Enlightenment, is the only thing that's real are atoms and particles banging into each other. Therefore, the sense within a human being of desiring something or love, the kinds of things that we thought were supernatural, non-physical. That we used to believe that those realities were the greater realities, even higher than the physical. But what science had supposedly taught us is all there is particles. So that your feelings of love or your feelings of desire, they're just chemical reactions in your brain. It's called epiphenomenal. They don't really refer to or mean anything. Therefore, whatever little impulse you have going inside of you, you can act upon, because it's just the random flying around of particles inside of you. There is no ultimate or transcendent reference to any of those things. The third thing that drove this revolution is that repression is bad for individuals. We don't want anybody to feel repressed, especially sexually repressed. And so people are unhappy. And this was really Sigmund Freud's idea. People are so unhappy and they're neurotic because they're not allowed to just do whatever they feel like doing. And if we could have a society where everyone just did what they felt, everyone would be thrilled and happy all the time. And so the idea of sex outside of marriage, which was viewed as being bad. And I got to thinking about this today. I grew up in the 80s. That's when I was a teenager. And in the 80s, my peers were misbehaving quite a bit. It was pretty wild in the 80s. But I wasn't allowed to do that in my house. So I didn't. I always had this deep sense that at any moment my father would appear and beat me to death. So my dad never beat me, by the way. But anyway, y'all get my point. But even my peers who were participating in things like sex outside of marriage, even the movies that would explore those topics, there still was this sense that it wasn't the right thing to do, that it was a way to rebel. And even though it was rebellious, and even though it wasn't wrong, and it was celebrating rebellion, it still said it was rebellion. It still said this isn't a good idea. And so the ethos was, we're getting away with something. We'll figure out how not to have any consequences from it. We'll find a way to wiggle out of what bad things might happen. But it's not the right thing to do. And even the children of the 80s knew what they really wanted to do was go to college, graduate, meet someone, marry, and have a life once they grew up a little bit. But still, if I had asked my peers about their behavior, they would have said something like, I know it's wrong, but I just can't help it. And I know I'm probably going to get into trouble at some point, but I'm kind of hoping I won't. But the shift now is that sex outside of marriage is a good thing to do. It's good to do. In fact, that's the best way for sex to express itself is outside of marriage. Marriage is actually bad. And having these experiences is actually good, and that's a revolutionary change. And within that, I have a couple of subpoints. Because we're sick because of our environment, so we're not really responsible. It's the environment around us that makes us unhappy. Everyone also needs therapy, and so it's this therapization. And I believe in the importance of Christian counseling. Please don't hear me low talking that, but I think we've gotten into another ditch that says to people all the time, since you're sick, since obviously you're miserable, right? And when you tell people over and over again they're sick and miserable, what happens to them? They start to feel sick and miserable, right? And then once you convince them that they're sick and miserable, then they're open to suggestions from you about what the remedy might be. And since you're sick and miserable because you're not being allowed to do whatever you feel like doing, what you ought to do is do whatever you feel like doing, and we're going to help you do that. And so it comes under the guise of compassion or even medicalization, but there's something much more sinister at work. And then within that, reality itself is merely a social construct. So since we're sort of the victims of the world around us, and you combine that idea with the fact that the world around us was just created by the people in charge. All of these things, including marriage, family, gender, all of these things are social constructs. And so you can reconstruct them to suit you. I've got a little note there to my self-college students, and this is referred to in your book. A guy just did a kind of a man-on-the-street set of interviews. I think it was on the campus of Washington State. And he's a 5.5 foot tall white guy. And he basically says to these college students, now I feel like I'm a 7-year-old. I'm a 7-year-old little girl. That's how I feel, and that's how I want to express myself. Most of the college students said, well, then I guess you are a 7-year-old little girl. And the number of students he would claim to be another race, he would claim to be another gender, he would claim to be a different age, he would claim to be another just ethnicity, and the vast majority of the students on that campus said, well, if that's true, if that's your truth, then I guess you really are a 7-year-old little girl. So society is socially constructed. But that all comes from this idea that society represses, and external mores and values actually are bad for people and don't allow people to be who they truly are. And so let's get rid of all those things, and happy, authentic people will emerge as a result. The fourth idea is that the nuclear family does not work for everyone. And it's hard to follow and live in alignment with the ideal of the nuclear family. And so since it doesn't work for everyone, let's get rid of it. And then, of course, within Marxism, what Marxism knows is that the family conserves values. And so if you're really going to lead people to have a different set of values, you really need to get rid of family, because family is the place where people learn their values. And so one of the things in the sexual revolution was the family really doesn't work for women. The family really doesn't work for women at all, and they need to be liberated from the home. And so they're going to be much happier not having to be in the home and to do what wives and mothers do. And then inside of that childbearing is an unfair burden on women. So let me ask you women this question: is childbearing an unfair burden on you? Now be honest. Thank you. The truth is, she said some days. Okay. So again, I walked with my wife through the carrying and labor and delivery and rearing of our 3 children. And what she's asked to do and what I'm asked to do, they're certainly not the same. It's an incredible demand on mothers. And it's not like what men have to walk through. And I think most of you ladies would say, if the men you were married to had to do even a fraction of what you went through, they'd curl up and die and that'd be it, right? Now, and the truth is, on some very interesting metrics, women are tougher than men are. They really are. They're especially their sensitivity to physical pain and their endurance a lot higher, so that they can be people who bring children into the world. So on one level, it isn't fair. It is an incredible burden. But that's not the end of the story. What else do you get by bringing children into the world? All the good stuff, all the rest of the good stuff that's about being alive. And it's this incredible blessing. It's both. Life's complicated. And so, and that's the way all of life is like. And the vast majority of women find a tremendous satisfaction in bringing children into the world and raising them. It's longitudinal to cross their lives. It's into grandparenthood and beyond, so it's something that functions your whole life. You're going to need people who love you no matter what when you get really old. Don't you? Right? And so it's hard for young people to think about that because it's so far off. But the truth is, nobody loves you like your family loves you and is going to see it. So it's very longitudinal. But since it seemed immediately unfair, the way to rectify that situation is to stop having babies. That if women really want a path to having a really great life, we should make childbearing not only optional, number one, but really subordinate to a life lived without children. And then fifthly, technology and science are good at solving problems. So there was a technological innovation to help with this childbearing problem called birth control, especially hormone birth control. It was instantly and overnight, it was popular. And I'm not making an argument against hormone birth control, at least not tonight. And it's easy for me to make an argument against it now that I'm out of the childbearing years, okay? But it is an example. Hey, all ladies, take this pill. It'll only have good results and it won't have any bad results. That's just not how technology works. Here's how solutions work. I've asked you this before. When you solve one problem, what do you also do? You create a bunch of other problems that didn't exist until you solved that problem. So what's one of the negative effects of birth control in the West? Negative birth rate. And so it may be that we go out of existence because of the birth control pill. Didn't think of that, right? And then there are several other impacts of giving people extra hormones that have all sorts of effects on women. They affect marriages. And in the interest of time, I won't go through all of that. But this idea this scientific idea that we can come up with just take this little pill And what we had with birth control is really, to my mind, the first large-scale medical intervention in something that was healthy, right? And so sometimes there are things that are essential to your biological makeup that are healthy that you want to turn off. Well, that starts with birth control hormones. Now how are we using hormones? To turn off puberty, which you're not really doing, but that's the idea. Oh, if gender-based puberty, which is going to continue to advance someone to grow fully into a mature gender that they were born in, if that's a problem, just like childbearing is a problem, what do? Take a pill, turn it off, no problem. And it's a huge mistake, but we got set up to medicalize problems and to think that medical solutions solve everything. So all of this sets up this idea that gets us to a place we never thought we would be, even 10 years ago, that a man really can stand up and say, I'm really a woman, I'm going to start wearing a dress, wearing makeup, I'm going to have surgery, I'm going to change my name, and you're going to have to treat me as though I'm a woman and talk to me and deal with me as though I'm this other personality, and you're the crazy one if you don't want to do it. These are, and when we talk about culture, we're trying to look at these deep dynamics that are going on. I didn't get to do this last week, so I just want to hit a couple of definitions that I think are very important as we work through this issue. First of all, so sex refers to one's biology. So you hear now words sex and gender, and we tend to want to, I grew up using these essentially interchangeably, but in our current cultural context, they have a difference. Sex is biology, and gender has to do with one's internal sense of self, which is gender ideology. Now, I lifted that right from the video we watched last week, but do you hear the philosophical commitments inside of that definition? Gender has to do with one's internal sense of self. As though one's internal sense of self is the final arbiter on such things. I don't know about your internal sense of self, but my internal sense of self was all over the map, right? But now even in that since I feel a certain way, or I sense that things are a certain way, then that is strong enough to arbitrate my decision making. And so one's internal sense of self is their gender identity. Now, I know what we're trying to learn is the verbiage that our culture is using right now, but something that I am thinking about and seeing if I could develop a discipline in doing is when someone says, well, my gender identity, is saying, yeah, I'm not down with that concept. I think that's made up. And so you talk about gender identity like you talk about the sky being blue or gravity. And what I want to say to you is, I don't really think you have a gender identity. I just think you have a gender. And so we're going to have to kind of get at this another way, because you're already asking me to cop to a series of philosophical commitments that I just don't share with you. I just don't think that's how the world works. I don't think that's what makes things real, is your sense of things. And then, and I've gone over this a couple of times, and I don't mean to be impolite. Ladies, listen to me, ladies. If there's a non-lady that says, I know what it feels like to be a woman, are you buying that? And we don't have to get into all the details, right? But there are some things that are very unique to the experience of being a woman, right? That I don't think a man has any idea about. There's no point of reference there. And so the best that can be is a series of stereotypes about what it means to be a woman, right? And so they'll say something like, well, I'm just very sensitive like a woman. Now, ladies, how does that make you feel to be told that your oversensitivity is what is essential about what it means to be a woman? First of all, have you all ever worked with any oversensitive men? Have you? Yes, you have, right? And on and on and on it goes. It is not possible. It's like me saying, I know, and of course, and here's where it goes. I feel like I'm a wolf. And so I'm going to start wearing ears and howling at the moon, and you got to treat me as though I'm a wolf. But here's the question. How do you know what a wolf feels like? Have you talked to one? You can't possibly know what it feels like to be a wolf. Besides the fact that I think this is what it likes to feel, is actually like to feel like you're a wolf. Food, 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 sleep, 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 more food, 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 girl, 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 girl. That's what it's like to be a wolf. You're about 4 motivations. That's it. That's it. So we operate linguistically. That's already become unmoored, and we're going to need to be more disciplined, I think, in saying, actually, you're already asking me to buy a bunch of stuff I'm not buying. So gender also refers to how people express themselves in society through their hairstyle, dress, mannerisms, hobbies, and interests. I'm so glad at least the definition is forthright. So here's what it means to be a woman. It's your hairstyle, your dress, your mannerisms, hobbies, and interests. You got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. We don't define anything else like that. But it's where you get, I'm going to put on these wolf ears, and I'm going to put on this wolf nose, and I'm going to put on a wolf tail, and that makes me a wolf. I'm going to carry a couple of tires around, and that makes me a car. You know, it doesn't work. It doesn't work, and so, and these things are called gender expression. And so, well, I feel like, at least we need to think, and I don't want to be rude, and I want to try to find points of contact with people, but to say, well, this is just my gender expression, that's not a thing. Gender expression isn't a thing. At best, it's a set of stereotypes about what you think the other gender does. I think all of you ladies ought to be offended when a transgender person puts on a dress, a man puts on a dress and says, that makes me a woman. As though putting on a dress, is that your manifestation of your femininity? It just doesn't stand to reason. So, but that's how, if you're hearing that terminology, and that's how it's used. Transgender is an identity. So this is how this flows. Transgender is an identity some people use when they experience some kind of incongruence between their biological sex and their gender identity. So they start to feel funny, and they start to feel funny about the struggles and the challenges of being male or being female, and that incongruence then means that perhaps I have the wrong gender identity. I think you would agree with me. It's very tenuous in its fundamental rationality. Gender dysphoria refers to the distress that comes from this incongruence between a person's body and their mind. And really, this is a much better term. It's an old clinical term. It predates a lot of these discussions, and it actually identifies what's really going on. Gender dysphoria says something's gone wrong. I'm having trouble. And I'm having trouble related to the way I feel when I see myself in the mirror, the way I feel when I think about what I'm being called to do within my gender. I feel uncomfortable as a woman when I think about having to form a relationship and perhaps a future marriage with a man. All of that causes me to feel depressed, anxious, upset, troubled. And that's a better description of the phenomena that can be expressed in transgenderism. All right, gender dysphoria. It's also the appropriate concept to bring in the discussion when a child, especially a prepubescent child, comes home and says, I want you to call me, Billy now wants to be Susie, and I want to wear a dress and go to school. Gender dysphoria is a better context for that conversation. And then I want to introduce you to a term that you may not know, autogynephilia. Autogynephilia. Autogynephilia is sexual arousal at the thought of oneself as the other gender. This, frankly, is the most likely psychological condition for male to female transgenderism. Okay, it's a fetish. And so this idea that what you want is for transgender men who are now women want to find a mate, marry, raise children, and have a life together is false. Most male to female transgender people have autogynephilia. They're turned on by looking at themselves in the mirror as the other gender. Now that's a dysfunctional sexual reality, but that's really what's going on. They don't want a partner. They're their partner. And typically that autogynephilia is the result of trauma. We talked about this a little bit last week. A sensitive boy wanders into his parents' bedroom, finds his mom's high heel shoes, slips them on and kind of likes the way that feels, and he's curious. Mom wears these things. Why does she wear them? I like the way she looks in them, but men don't wear them. What's going on? You think of an 8-year-old kind of processes some of these things out, and he plops out into the living room with those high heels on, and Dad screams bloody murder and calls him bad names and hits him. And you never do that. It just goes bonkers. And so the 8-year-old boy stuffs those feelings down, identifies them as wrong and bad and shameful. Let me ask you, all you sinners out there, how does shame function in our lives? What's the effect of a good old dose of shame? Good? It's good for you? It's soul destroying. Secrets. I can't talk to anyone. No one likes me. It's just a destruction core of gravity. So the little 8-year-old has this deep shame over this thing. It has a gender reference to it. And then when the 8-year-old hits puberty, which is a confusing time, everybody's upset and messed up, that shame gets sexualized. And there you go. And so it gets broken and perverted, and then it starts to fuel something that comes into full-scale autogynephilia. And that probably describes most, and this usually manifests itself late 20s, early 30s, and this was typical of transgenderism before about 10 years ago. The vast majority of transgender people were men. The vast majority of transgender men were well into adulthood when it rose up. Okay? And so, well, I'll circle back to that in just a second. But that's a concept. Again, I wouldn't really encourage anyone to study it very deeply because it's a very dark, disturbing subject. But that is a reality, and that's probably the psychological dynamic for the vast majority of men who begin to say that they're actually women. So we started looking then at how do we walk through when these problems manifest themselves in your life. We looked last week at the familial component. When a child or a grandchild comes home and says, "I want you to start calling me a different name. I want to use different pronouns. I'm going to dress like the other gender." And I won't go over it. Just get the podcast from last week. But the conclusion is that I think is important is this. And let me repeat. Loving them, caring for them, knowing that nothing they can do can ever turn your love away. You're going to walk with them through this. Jesus is more than enough. Be the hands and feet of Christ to that child or grandchild. Let them know that they're loved, because part of what's going on with them is they feel very unloved and very unlovely. And then just know this, that genuine, persistent gender dysphoria is very, very, very rare. And so the likelihood that your child or grandchild is transgender is rare. Much more likely is they're struggling, they need some attention, they got something going on, they got hurt, and they need some counseling, and somebody can help walk them through that. But the likelihood that they're going to have a lifelong struggle with gender dysphoria is super, super, super rare. And so it's not where you start. Let's go have surgery. Let's go on puberty blockers. Hold on. Remember the girl that spoke on the video? She said in 6 weeks she was on hormones, and in a couple of years she was getting surgery. When when none of that should have even been considered for years. Of course, what we're learning now, it should never be considered. None of those things should ever be done. But it should be the end diagnosis of a long process of counseling and that sort of thing. So anyway, but let me keep moving. Then the interpersonal component. What do you do when you encounter someone who's transgender just in your world? They're not a part of your family, but suddenly you find yourself confronted with someone who's transgender. The first thing is how to interact with them is challenging, because transgender ideology, we'll get to this in just a moment, is predicated on wrecking social integration. And so feeling like you don't know what to say, and you don't know what to do, and you don't know what words to use or what to call them, you don't know if you point it out, or you don't know what to do when you're looking at a man dressed up as a woman. And so you feel awkward, right? One of the things I want you to know is you feeling awkward is the point. That's the transgender ideology wants to blow the whole thing up. And so they want to make it impossible for us to get along with each other. Revolution is the point. And I don't know if I have an application to that, except that it's okay that you feel very strange, because who knows what to do? Who knows what the rules are when someone's dressed up as the other gender and behaving as the other gender? Because you feel like you've stepped through the looking glass, right? And so it's okay that you feel awkward, feeling awkward and not sure what to do is the point. Secondly, so you follow Jesus in truth, love, and courage. In some ways, I think the analogy is the demon-possessed person. Jesus gets out of the boat at Gadara, and the demoniac, he's got the 1,000 people inside of him. He's naked. He's cutting himself. He's probably hard to relate to, right? Hard to strike up a conversation with that guy, right? And Jesus just walks towards him, smiles at him, speaks the truth to him, gets into a conversation. And what people will do, if you really love them, is what I talked about Sunday. If you'll love, care, listen to them, smile at them, go to them with an open hand, but be full of the truth. You spend enough time with them like that, they'll tell you what's wrong with them. Just like Legion said, my name. Jesus asked, what did Jesus say to him? What's your name?
Legion, because there's so many.
Right. Say it again.
Legion, because there's so many.
That's right. So Jesus basically says, I want to know who you are. Tell me who you are. And the guy's really, in some sense, saying, you don't want to know who I am. I'm a mess. I'm 1,000 messes. And Jesus says, I'm just the guy to talk to. Turns out I know exactly what to do with 1,000 messes. But he also does something about it. He doesn't say, hey, you be you, or you be 1,000 yous. He calls them to truth. So we step towards it with truth, love, and courage. The solution is an encounter with Jesus. And this is a great thing I have learned from this video series. Not being transgender anymore is not going to get them into heaven. Giving their lives to Jesus Christ is what's going to get them into heaven. And then following Him, He just will lead them out of whatever He's got to lead them out of, just like He led us out of all the stuff He needed to lead us out of. But getting them to Jesus is the point, not getting them to share your to share your sexual ethic. Yet, if the question of sexual ethics comes up, you tell the truth. You tell the truth. God's Word speaks against this, and it does so because this is designed to destroy you, not to help you live. And then within this, I've just got this little thing. When you're working with a transgender person and how to integrate them into your life, you need to remember that your children's well-being is a priority. And if that scenario, which I think it will, is a topic that is too much for your child at their particular age, then you have to be mindful and wise about bringing that person into your life when your children aren't ready. Okay? So that's enough on that. That's just some wisdom I put out to you. So that's the interpersonal component. Then the cultural component. What do I do when I encounter this ideology in my world? You start to see these things crop up at school. First of all, you confront the ideological lies. Here's the ideological lie number one, and I got this from Daniel Gardner. I never thought of this before until Daniel and I talked. The lie is the body must conform to the mind. Since I feel a certain way inside, I must conform, my body must start to conform to it by me changing my body. And Daniel said to me, well, what if it's the other way around? What if, because the idea is my mind is right and my body is wrong. Well, but what if your body is right and your mind is wrong? How do you know? And I thought, that is a great question. And that's true. It's much more likely that what's wrong? Much more likely that what is wrong? Your mind is wrong. And much easier to do something about than chopping your body up or taking a bunch of chemicals or doing things that's going to ruin what your body was designed to do. Within this is the idea that the world must conform to the person. At the heart of the Western worldview is that the person must conform to the world. My soul must conform to the greatness of the greatest being. And I'm the thing that has to change. And I conform to the reality of the world and to the one who's in charge of the reality of the world. And then I can find myself matching the pattern of truth, love, and beauty. But this ideological lie is, no, the world must conform to me. The world must take the shape that I want it to shape. The result is billions of people all living in their little worlds that can't get along with other little worlds because you got a million different sets of rules about how we're all supposed to be treated. And the end result is we cannot talk to each other. And so confront that lie. Secondly, the lie that children are small adults. Where this is really, there's a bright line is we are not going to do gender ideology with children. And I want to tell you, anybody under 18 does not need to have any exposure to gender ideology. And we need to start standing up and saying that at school. No, the answer is no. Absolutely not. The Marxists know they got to get the kids. If you're going to get the culture, you got to get the kids. And so their view is that children are just little adults, and that means sexually as well. And so you need to start doing sexual education and sexual ideology right away. That some of the cultural Marxists have done experiments and have made the claim that even infants are sexual creatures and can experience sexual arousal. Mainly you can generate that kind of data by abusing children. Okay? But what is true is that children are not small adults. They're not sexual beings from day one. And so what we're going to say is that exposing children to sexual ideology is harmful. And this is what I mean. When a 6-year-old goes to our library and picks up a book that has a knight and a prince getting married and kissing at the end, that's child abuse. Oh no, this is just another way. No. Now, adults, we want to read kooky stuff. This is America. I believe in the freedom of expression, and it has its place, and I'm not a fan of censoring, but we know that children aren't adults. And we have all kinds of rules for children, and so we're not going to have this other. Because I believe that when you show a child two men kissing and affirm that, all kinds of alarm bells start going off because children know there's only two genders, right? They have a simple wisdom. And when you put that in front of them, they're going to see it at some point anyway, and you're going to have to deal with it at some point anyway, but we're not going to pitch this stuff to them as okay. We'll talk more about that as we go. Children are wired to thrive in the ideal environment of dad, mom, and family. Now, we live in a broken world, and not every child gets mom, dad, and family. Even folks of you here in this room, because of the brokenness in the world, somebody didn't hold up their end of the bargain, and you had to work your family out in a less than an ideal environment. Because you're a believer, Jesus is great at making up what's needed. But the ideal scenario, the best for the most kids, is that they grow up in a home where mom and dad are available to them. And we all struggle with that ideal. I was an imperfect father. Janet was an imperfect mother. We were often imperfect in our marriage relationship, and our children will experience the negative effects of my sinfulness. But the ideal is still the goal that we're all shooting for. That's what's best for kids, and that's the ideal that we want put before them during their childhood years. And so I think we need to start advocating at school that children need to see nuclear families when they see pictures of families, a male and a female and their kids doing stuff together. They're wired for that, and That's the best environment for them. Thirdly, messing with children harms and destabilizes them. That's the point of sexual Marxism, by the way. When you make children afraid, upset, when you put things in front of them that they're not wired or designed to handle, and that confuses them. Well, we think confusing and upsetting children for things that are beyond their pay grade is the wrong thing to do to them. But the people who are running this show in our education system now, they think it's the right thing to do to them. I want you to know that. They want them to be disturbed and upset. That when you hear the word critical, we want critical education. What they mean is they want to freak children out and make them afraid, make them scared, cause them to have doubts about their own identity, and they want to make them sick. And that's really what we're watching too in some of the way that therapy is used in the schools. So it's even a little bit of a hubbub that's going on in our own school system. As some parents have wanted to know, well, what are y'all using in your counseling techniques and that sort of thing? We've been having a little trouble getting the information. I don't know about you, but if you come up to me and ask me for some information about the church, and I tell you, you can't have that information. Are you going to go, oh, okay, nothing to see here? Or are you going to think, oh, why won't you let me see it? So there is, what I'm beginning to be increasingly concerned about is that we are saying to the kids too much, are you okay? Are you okay? Is something wrong? You look sad. And again, if you ask people enough times if they don't feel good, certainly if you ask me, if 5 people said, oh, Pastor, you feel too good today, I'd be, yeah, I think I got a fever. I am a sympathetic, sick person. I'm a hypochondriac in that way. And so I think the point I'm making is the idea that doing things that make kids feel destabilized is the wrong thing to do. There are those with a different cultural ideology that think that's actually the right thing to do. And then finally, school is not group therapy for children with gender dysphoria. And that's another thing we've got to, and this is I know this is a hard thing that I'm saying, but when a 3rd grader shows up as the opposite gender, 3rd grade in our public schools is not the place for that child. Unless the child wants to dress like his sex and go by his name. Even if at home or some other ways a family wants to try to work through the gender dysphoria in another way, I still think it's abuse, honestly. But my point is they ought not be allowed to come up to 3rd grade and knock everybody else off kilter. Because when a transgender child shows up in a 3rd grade class, what are all those 3rd graders going to want to talk about and know about when they get home from school? What is that? What's going on? And how ready are they to have that conversation at age 8? The fact that they're being forced to have it, it's not good for them. It's not good for them. But again, you follow all. But if children are really just little adults, then you just decide for everybody we're gonna do gender dysphoria group therapy in the 3rd grade. And that's not what 3rd grade's for. What's 3rd grade for? Reading, writing, arithmetic, and socialization. Being socialized so that we can learn to get along with one another. That's what it's for. So having the courage, that's going to fall on some ears in a hard way, but we need to identify that. And then another cultural lie is that gender is merely a social construct. Your book goes over this in a really effective way. I'll just hit a couple of highlights, and I've already really referred to it. One is reductio absurdum is an argument. Is just take the argument that gender is merely a social construct to its logical conclusion. If gender is a social construct, then age is a social construct. Ethnicity is a social construct. That just, if it still probably would be pretty hard for me to go out on the streets of Fairhope and convince someone that I am a 7-year-old Hispanic female. I think people are going to have a little trouble swallowing that. And maybe you can get a goofy college student to agree to it, but if I show up at school and ask if I can go to the second grade because I'm a 7-year-old Hispanic female and I want to use the girls' bathroom in the third grade, that starts to get harder to get rid of the cognitive dissonance over that, right? And then something that even your authors mentioned, I'll talk about schools, but even Social Security checks. I am actually a 67-year-old male. And I'd like to go ahead and start drawing Social Security. Or 62. When is it, 62? When can you start drawing Social Security? Some of you experts out there. 62, all right? Right? So I go into the Social Security office right up the road and say, I'm actually identify as 62. Or even better, Jake Hankins goes into the Social Security office and says, I'm on my birth certificate, I'm 21, but I actually identify as a 62-year-old. Let's get these checks rolling. It's not gonna work, right? And so you just take it to its logical extremes. You cannot run a society that way. Fourthly, we should validate people's thoughts and feelings so that they'll flourish. And that's really the idea behind those students that were that we asked those questions on the campus of Washington State. If it makes people feel better for people around them to affirm that they're really a 6-year-old girl, why not? And what we know is validating people's erroneous thoughts and feelings that are dislodged from reality isn't good for them. It's bad for them. It makes them sicker. It's going to get them hurt. Conforming to the self that is real leads to flourishing, not the opposite. People who are having trouble integrating themselves on the inside and integrating with others on the outside need to be helped to make those integrations, because that's what we're made for. We're made to love and to know people and to formulate families and to have social gatherings and to get along with each other. And the more of that we have going on, the better we feel. And then we start actually making a contribution to those processes so that the people around us and communities around us are stronger. That's what our nervous systems really are created to manage and regulate. And people feel better and better and better that way. And that's what we need to be helping them to do. People's distress must be acknowledged, but reality is the solution. And I think this is what we've got to learn to do. Someone can say, I am really struggling here. I'm having a rough time when I think about the demands of being a man and how can I live up to that, or the demands of being a woman and what that's going to look like. And that doesn't feel right to me. Thank you for sharing that. That's not an uncommon situation. I'm sorry you're so distressed and depressed by it. Many people are. Man, let's have a chat about it and let's get you talking to someone who could really help you with it, because there's great help. Okay? Fifth, gender-affirming care is the solution to gender distress. There is no evidence that it helps. There's plenty of evidence that it hurts. Gender-affirming care doesn't work. They're not doing it anymore in Europe. And so the question I put there is, why do we keep doing it? If we already know it makes people more depressed and anxious, it doesn't help them, and it's so bad for people. They're not doing it in places that are much more liberal than our country. So what's the answer? Why keep doing it? Why keep doing gender-affirming care if it doesn't work? This is not a rhetorical question. Well,
because right now our society leaders say we're going to do it.
Okay, so the people in power want to go, but why would the people in power want to continue to do something that doesn't work?
Maintaining control.
It's a all right, maintain control. Why else?
No crisis to go to waste.
Don't let any crisis go to waste. What is often the answer if it's not working? We just need more money, more time, and we'll turn the corner, right? What's the problem with that argument? There's no metric for it. You just keep going up. And then the answer that I'm looking for, students, is it's driven by ideology. It's not based on science. It's faith. It's faith. And so the facts don't matter. The outcomes don't matter. There's always a way to get around the science. There's always a way to pay for a different study that shows a different result, because you already made up your mind by faith that the Western worldview is bad for people, and there's going to be this whole new way that's going to bring something good. And if you have to tear up some people in the process, well, so be it. And really, I think that's ultimately the reason is vulnerable children are a convenient target for the ideologues. And so they're just cannon fodder in an ideological war. And if the point is tearing everything up, then tear some children up. And so it's for the greater good. It's for the greater good. And at some point, that's what we have to be willing to say. If you continue to hurt children, even though you know that you're hurting them and not helping them, then you bought into a larger and scarier ideology about just tearing stuff up. And we're saying no to that. So, and then address the ideological underpinnings. And I know I've got 5 minutes and I'm not going to run over, so let's hurry through. And I'm really just going to repeat a few things. That transgender ideology is sexual Marxism, and I'm trying to grow, and I want to be appropriate in my speech to outsiders, but I think in the right context, we're going to have to start saying that's actually, I think a better word for the transgenderism is sexual Marxism. And get people to see if you can draw people into a conversation about these ideological realities that are at work. Doesn't help vulnerable kids. Only reason to do it is because revolution and destabilization is the point. And we really think the ideas and ideals of Western tradition are wrong. That's what's being said. And I think what we want to start saying, especially when it comes to the education system, is what we want in our schools is for the ideas and ideals of the Western tradition to be celebrated and taught in our schools. And if kids want to bust them up and break them apart in their college experience, well, I still don't think our state universities should be doing that, but that's a conversation for another day. But I think while kids are below the age of 18, they just need to be taught the Western tradition. And we're just not going to teach that other stuff. One, because it's wrong. And two, because you need to lay a foundation of a tried and true wisdom tradition and philosophical tradition. And school is hard enough, and there's only a limited number of things that kids have the time and energy and bandwidth to learn. And just learning the Western tradition, that takes up plenty of time and energy. And that's what we're gonna focus on as we teach. And then what we want to say there in B is compassion for children is a powerful cover-up for destructive intentions. And so I've been reading a report about LGBTQ plus kids in Baldwin County. I mean, this is being studied and reports are being done about what to do. And it all is under this cover that we really care about kids, especially kids that don't fit in. And let me ask you this. Should you care about kids that are struggling and don't fit in? Absolutely. They're a top priority for us. We want to run to those kids. We care about those kids. But doing things that make their lives worse isn't compassion. It's very unloving and it's very destructive. And so when we know that we're doing things that don't help them, we're going to put a stop to it because that's what it means to have compassion for people who are struggling. Well, y'all been great. I know I've covered a ton of ground. Be thinking about these things. And hey, listen up, everybody. Thank you for continuing to come back. Every Wednesday I come in here and I think it's going to be me and like Daniel and that's it. But you have proven almost nothing I can do can wear you down. So I'm going to come up with badges for all of you if you get to the end of this. You've been great. And please let me say this. I'm learning a ton as I get this together. And so some of this is me getting this thing noodled out of my own mind. Thank you for participating in this journey and for being gluttons for punishment. Let me pray for you. I'll let you get going. Father, the point I want to be at and I want us to be at as we come to this conclusion is we want to be the hands and feet of Christ to people. And Lord, as I go through these things, there's a sense in which I can just feel I can feel myself getting wound up. And I know that some of that comes from a good place. I do care about people and I care about the truth and I care about children. But God, also the dark fleshly part of me, it just makes me mad. It makes me frightened. It makes me want to have bad intentions towards people who are on the other side of this from me. And so, Holy Spirit, only you can teach me and us together what it means to be followers of Jesus in this. The one who knew how to combine truth and grace. The one who knew how to walk with truth, love, and courage into any place you put him. And so, Lord, teach us how to get ourselves equipped and strategized to be like Jesus as we walk in this sinful world. Ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. You're dismissed. Thank you.